Hi, I'm Judge Zella, and today I'm going to walk you all through what I think personally is one of my favorite campaigns that I've ever read. I have yet to run it to its full completion, but I am very excited to have a group to get together to play the Pirates of Drinax. This is a slideshow dossier that I put together based on a PDF dossier that I put together for new players to the game, based on another PDF that I made. This thing's gone through a lot of iterations. It's probably the fifth version. I'm going to have a link to the PDF file for the document. The document is called "So You Want to Be a Space Pirate." And so you think you want to be a space pirate, Trojan Reach Edition, a helpful guide for Drinaxi Corsairs by Scholar Voa, master of the Scholar's Tower of the floating palace of King Oleb the 16th, Dragon Emperor of Sindal in exile. And this is a pretty long document. It's pretty daunting to go through, so I've decided to break it up into a bunch of sections and put it into video format to make it easier for people to kind of digest. You can use this for your players as well if you'd like. This is for my players specifically, but I'm just going to run the campaign vanilla. So this is great. If you've never run the campaign, or you've never played the campaign, or you've never even heard of the campaign, this is a fantastic video because it's going to include a lot of campaign information, but no spoilers. It's not going to be enough information for you to run the campaign yourself, but it's going to be enough information to kind of get you hooked on some of the story threads, as well as I'm also going to be explaining Traveler in general to new players. And so let's kind of get into the schedule or whatever of how this is going to work. The Pirates of Drinax. Welcome to the far future. So table of contents, this will be part one. I might split this video into two parts, at least for the production side, and I may combine them into one video. But we're going to start off with, what is Traveler? How does this universe work? Then we're going to go to, when are we? A timeline of the far future. Where and who are we will be part 3, the Trojan Reach, and who live, and the, Then we'll move on to part 3, where and who are we, the Trojan Reach, and those who live there. Part 4 will be, how is life in the far future, making a living in deep space, and I'll cover some of the economic ways that you can make money. Then in part 2, we're going to get a little more local. We're going to talk about the Kingdom of Drinax, also known as the Kingdom of Sindal in exile. The Last Harrier will be part 6, Verherg H984 Commerce Raider. This will be the ship that the campaign is taking place on. Then finally, Making a Traveler, the character creation system for Traveler. This is the most interesting part about Traveler as a game, and honestly, I think the thing that hooked me on the game and really gives you a flavor for how the game is going to go in a lot of very unique and novel ways. Then finally, developing characters. This is just a single slide, 10 questions to ask your new Traveler. I use this for all my campaigns. This is one of the things that's like just completely kind of like my own thing. It is obviously asking your players questions or having a questionnaire for your players is not a new thing, and many people do this, but this is one that I kind of like developed for this campaign myself. So let's go into part 1. What is Traveler? How does this universe work? So Traveler is a sci-fi game about spaceships, first and foremost, I would say. I think that developing a system for the players to kind of tell a story as individuals was developed throughout the game itself. And I think that that's most evidenced by the thing that everyone knows the game by, is that you can die during character creation, or rather what I would refer to as character generation, because the player choice is in many ways limited. And back in the first editions of Traveler, There is a single roll called survival, and if you failed this roll, you were done. You died. It was over. And you had to restart from the beginning and make a new character. And so character creation was kind of like this night of a mini game of trying to get a character who would live through character creation because it was so incredibly deadly. And then the game itself was pretty deadly for characters as well between ship-to-ship combat. This has been de-emphasized in later editions. In almost every other edition, it's kind of like they've stepped it back further and further to where now it's very unlikely that you'll die during character creation. The only time I have died during character creation, it was like a weird fluke where I realized that if I was to apply my character's like species bonuses and detriments, they're like stat modifiers, that they would have died during an event prior. So it happens, but not all the time, not nearly as with the frequency that it used to. So the game it's still very possible, but no longer as frequent. This is the box for the original game. Never mind this art. This art came later. Originally, it was literally just a black box with little black books inside, and it said, "This is Free Trader Beowulf, calling anyone. Mayday! Mayday! We're under attack. Main drive is gone. Turret number 1 not responding. Mayday! Losing cabin pressure. Fast! Losing cabin pressure fast. Calling anyone. Please help! This is Free Trader Beowulf. Mayday!" And then Traveler. Science fiction adventure in the far future. Very basic. But I think that having like a small like monologue on the front cover of your little box set, I think it drove people's imaginations in some very interesting ways, because it's like, what is this game? It's science fiction adventure in the far future. And what is the far future all about? So let's talk a little bit about how the universe works. So mankind has spread out from Earth. The humans are no longer just on one planet, so they have a new style of directions. They have core word, which is towards the center of the galaxy. Rimward, which is towards the outer rim of the galaxy. Spinward, which is towards the direction of the spin, and trailing, which is against the direction of the spin of the galaxy. They have these kind of like, it implies a swirl, basically. And that's important because north, south, east, west, these things don't exist in space. However, the limitations of the game require that the maps must be printed on paper, and so you could be using north, south, east, and west, but it would be confusing and it would hurt your believability for the game. So they chose to rename them Rimward, Coreward, Trailing, and Spinward. And it makes a lot of sense on a map like this. So down here near the Solomani sphere, there's this little that's like a tan dot. That's Earth. That's us. We've spread out. The Solomonis are people from Earth, people who descend from Sol system, our particular solar system. The Imperium, we'll get to them. This is the Traveler universe. This is like the known galaxy of the Traveler universe. There's more than just this, but this is so much more than you need. We'll get into it, but this is so much more than you'll ever need. Each one of these rectangles needs at least one book, and that book is going to skip a ton of solar systems. Just a fucking ton of solar systems it's going to skip. And that's fine. Because there's ways to extrapolate that info. This is a very small amount of our galaxy, but it's more than enough for adventures beyond your imagination. So let's start getting a little bit more into it. When are we? A timeline of the far future. So Traveler is based on classical sci-fi novels. And they've a lot of classical sci-fi novels, at least either in themselves as a series or in a introductory section, had a timeline of the far future, how we got to this point. H.B. Piper is a person who had some of those. Isaac Asimov and the Foundation series famously has a very long timeline that goes along with it. The Dune universe as well has an incredibly long timeline that equals the amount of time. Frank Herbert specifically, it was the dawn of the human race until the time that he wrote it. He wanted to go that far into the future. And so, very long timelines is a staple of classical sci-fi. And so this game is no different. So let's get started with what I would say is kind of like the diverging point. In our calendar, the year 2097, the Interstellar Wars began. They were a series of conflicts between the Villani Zerusika and various Terran governments. Initially, various Terran nations, then the United Nations, then the United Worlds, and the Terran Confederation governments. Over 2 centuries, Terran social and technological dynamism led to conquest of Villani territory and the eventual collapse of central authority in the Zerusika to be replaced by the rule of man. So this is Terra, and this is Vland. This is the Villani Empire. Terrans discover the Villani kind of by accident. They show up to what they believe are ancient ruins, and there's just like people in there like playing cards who are there like monitoring some scientific equipment on like what is believed to be a very distant outpost on the edge of their massive empire. The Villani Empire, it could be, think of it a lot like Rome. Think of it a lot like ancient Rome. If you think about Rome a lot, I don't particularly think about Rome too often, but I do think about it because like it was a very big empire, and big empires are difficult to govern for a lot of reasons. And the high technology level of the Traveler universe doesn't make it any easier to govern a very large empire. And so the empire had stagnated in a lot of ways, and the Terrans were able to win the Interstellar Wars and form their own Imperium. They took over the old Imperium. They were basically, this Imperium's under new management. We've got a new Imperium now. No more Villani. This is going to be the Imperium of Man. And look, there's something interesting about the Traveler universe where it focuses more on like convergent evolutionary theory, where being bipedal and having 2 limbs is kind of like that's the norm for most sapient species. And the Villani are technically a different species than humans, but their biology is basically the same. If you've ever seen Star Trek, like the Bajorans, like they have like just nose ridges, that's what I'm talking about. Like little latex changes is what the majority of the Traveler universe is made of. And then a few aliens that could easily be done with like some kind of rubber mask or a suit. And then maybe 1 or 2 that would be a little bit more complex to do. So I'm thinking like more Star Trek style monsters, and not even monsters, but like species that we'll get more into the species, but monster is not, I shouldn't have even said monster, because my God, this game really focuses on the cultural ecology of these empires, and we'll get more into that. But let's talk about the Second Imperium, also known as the Rule of Man, the Terran Imperium, the Ramshackle Empire, it inherited and worsened problems from the Vellani Imperium. So, the Terran Secretariat attempted to transfer control directly to Terra and to incorporate the conquered regions into the Terran Confederation. The commander-in-chief of the Terran Navy, Admiral Hiroshi Estigarribia, realized that the Confederation government could not possibly control the vast territories of the Vellani Imperium. He proclaimed himself regent of the Vellani Imperium and protector of Terra, so both states were now united in the rule of man. Nearly all the fleet sided with Estigarribia, both because it was composed largely of colonials who were underrepresented under Terran Confederation government, and because Estigarribia's careful preparation. The Confederation was dissolved without significant resistance. So, basically, one dude was able to kind of like maneuver his way and what was ostensibly like a very well maneuvered military coup, like a coup d'etat, a bloodless transition of power, uh, during what was a very, I mean, I don't think that this was never a bigger battle in the history of our civilization than the one with the Vellani Empire, and we were able to somehow come out on top. It's very impressive. However, yeah, they inherited a lot of problems, and it wasn't too long. So, the Second Imperium only lasts from the year 2316 to 2744. So that's like almost 500 years. But like it falls apart. They don't do a good job. And it leads to the dissolution of the Imperium. And a quick word on like intergalactic empires. Why do you need an intergalactic empire? Like, why do you need these planets to all be part of like some United Federation of Planets, or the Empire like in Star Wars, or even the before the Empire there was a collective, united government of all of these planets. Like, why does this keep happening in sci-fi? Well, it's because scientists believe that in the far future we'll need to trade, because like not every planet, like if you look at like planets even in our solar system, like ours is the only one that has like food growing on it. So if we were to colonize other planets in our solar system, we would need to develop like either really robust hydroponic operations that would like feed way more people than hydroponics are currently capable of doing, or terraforming, which are both like the amount of time and energy involved and money and developing all of that stuff is pretty insane. But if we just had like a really good trade network that like, every like week or even like month or 2 months, like a large shipment of food came in, and we like brought out minerals or other goods that were able, like if there's like a bunch of like zinc on Mars, and we're like mining the zinc on Mars and like sending it back or whatever we need, yeah, like that makes sense. Or like asteroids or any of that stuff. Like we're like even setting up a hydroponics operation on an asteroid or in the asteroid belt, it's dubious. But shipping stuff, if we can just ship stuff like back and forth, like people and goods and all that stuff, then it becomes feasible. And they're kind of like scaling that up on like a universe scale. Like, not like there's water worlds. There's water worlds that like have a ton of fish, but they don't have a lot of like metals and ores that they can get to easily to build floating structures, or maybe like, they don't have like jet fuel or whatever. So you trade, and you need the empire to kind of like facilitate trade, or at least that's the idea. Without the empire, without trade, things get a little ugly. It's intense anarchy, because you need goods. And there's actually a Terran, I'll say Terran, an Earth example in Earth history in the late Bronze Age. This is the belief that there was like a very large volcanic eruption that sent enough ash into the atmosphere that displaced a lot of people. And those displaced people were in search of food and like land that they could grow on and live on, because like the sun went out where they were. And it was a very intense time where there was a melding of a lot of like different ideas of people who wouldn't normally like get together and leave to go raiding. You know, this wasn't something that they were necessarily doing often. And honestly, the established states in the Mesopotamian region, so we're talking about like the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Manutians, they all basically got wiped out except for the Egyptians, and were sent back to the like caves in the mountains. Like they abandoned the coastal regions because of the sea peoples, the people who came from the sea, the people who came from elsewhere. And it was this massive upheaval because they weren't able to get the goods that they normally need to survive, and they were trying to survive in the only way that they could, which was by going and like taking, you know, goods from other people, because they couldn't even communicate. There was no communication with anybody back then. So the idea is that that kind of thing could happen again if a centralized power structure ever dissolved, if there was ever some kind of state collapse, or in this case, on a galactic scale, this was double state collapse, which is even worse than state collapse. And I'm not going to go into that right now, but let's talk about this period of intense anarchy, this widespread disaster. Because, like, again, these widespread disasters, these famines, these loss of important resource and trade or wealth or medical supplies or anything, like maybe even water on planets that don't have a lot of water on them, terraforming equipment, like this, we're talking like massive disaster here across the entire galaxy. Technological regression, places that were relying on technology that they were receiving from other planets then regressed technologically, so you could have a planet where they had like flying cars slowly turn into a planet where like those flying cars are being fitted with like wooden wheels and being dragged by pack animals, or being converted into like some kind of rudimentary shelter. Like it gets pretty wild and weird. Interstellar disaster as well. You have things like orbital cities, or like Dyson spheres that are being built that like fall into the sun, and then the sun like gets a bunch of extra fuel it's not supposed to have, and that sends a wave of like solar radiation through that solar system that just like cooks it all. Like, yeah, like we're talking all kinds of horrible stuff. And this is just a period that lasts, what is that, almost 2,000 years. Almost 2,000 years. Just shy. That's wild. That's absolutely wild. This period in time, like, really, to me, and the fact that it shares the name with a similar period in Game of Thrones, where it's darkness and the White Walkers and houses as big as spiders, or whatever it was, whatever that old lady said in the first season of Game of Thrones. That, like, I feel like the spiders as big as houses or horses. I don't remember what she said. There's never a payoff. I never got my spiders as big as houses, and I'm very upset by it. I'm still angry. Moving on. The Long Night Bad. Long Night Bad. No, it's a bad time. But the Third Imperium is then founded. The Third Imperium is founded in the year 4521. 4521. Or, on the imperial calendar, 0. Yes, so they make their own calendar. They start year 0 when they found the Third Imperium. And the Imperium has lasted 1,105 years at the start of the campaign. We start in 1105. It is known as a good time. It's a good time. But let's talk a little bit about the Third Imperium. They are a feudal confederacy, so there is an emperor, but there are also like confederated worlds that are like gathered together in like one kind of like large group. And the goal is This is a quote. This is a quote from a official founding document of the Third Imperium. Oh my god, my mouse is everywhere.
The worlds of the universe lie separated by the vastness of space, each alone and dependent upon its own resources. In the past, a greater community of worlds has existed, promoting a greater good for all its members, and for all those who have interacted with it. The time has now come to re-establish that greater community on the foundations of the past in order to promote safe travel among the stars, the exploration of worlds circling those stars, the pursuit of knowledge, mutually profitable trade and commerce, the active exchange of information and tech, the individual pursuits of personal betterment, and the collective pursuit of community good. We hereby reestablish the grand empire of the stars.
And that brings us to the Golden Age, which is today. On the Terran calendar, it's the year 5627. On the Imperial calendar, it's the year 1105. This is a much more detailed map. This is the same map that I showed you before, but this is a much more detailed map. This comes from a website called travelermap.com. And if you want to just see the scale, the scale of this sci-fi universe, I highly recommend it. I don't know if you can make it out in this video, but each gray dot is a star. At least one star. Some of these are binary systems. Each gray dot is a star that has worlds revolving around it. And each of those worlds is fully explorable in the game. I know I'm starting to sound like Todd Howard now, but like this is so insane for a tabletop game. Like travelermap.com might be the single greatest RPG utility ever created in the history of the universe. And it, coupled with the Traveler Wiki, make running this game very interesting. It makes researching the game very fun and kind of a lot easier, and I highly recommend it. I would not have been able to make any of the content that I made for this video without it. Absolutely not. Travelermap.com and Traveler Wiki, bar none. You know, they are the best. Oh wait, let me go back. Let me explain more. It's the Golden Age. Everything's great right now. The Third Imperium has member worlds that agree to pay taxes and obey a few fundamental laws, which the Imperium promulgates. These are the high laws. In return, the Imperium agrees to patrol space between the worlds, to protect interstellar trade, to encourage travel and commerce, and to arbitrate diplomatic relations between worlds. Beyond this, individual worlds are left to their own devices so long as they acknowledge the power of the Imperium to rule the space between the stars. Imperial power is present on member worlds in the form of starports, consulates, bureaucratic offices, and bases. Sometimes larger enclaves of Imperial power are placed where they can enhance the Emperor's strength. And there you have it. That's the red on the map. There's more. The orange below the red, right down here, that's the Solomani sphere. They're separatists. They're like, no, we're too good for the Villani, for the old Villani Empire. We've created our own empire. And there's a lot that I'm not really going to go into that because it's not important. Not for us, not right now. This yellow empire right here, that's the Aslani Hirate. They are like lion people, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. Let's go to the next slide here. The next section. Where/who are we? The Trojan Reach. So here's a little, we're zoomed in now on that map. And so the Aslani Hirate has this little non-connected, as you can see, there's not a lot of worlds in this claw-shaped region. This is called the Claw, and it is difficult to jump because there's not a lot of worlds to jump to. The Aslan have a route that has gotten them here. But they haven't Their empire has not met with the Earth Empire yet. This is the Trojan Reach, and this is where our story takes place. Let's zoom in a little closer here. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. There are 327 inhabited worlds in this sector. 604 billion people with a per capita income of 6,335 credits. It's got an economy worth 3,826,823. The economy is worth 3,826,823 billion credits. Each of those being a billion credits, so massive amount of economy going on here. It has 275 starports. 53 of those are Class A, 151 are Class B, 34 Class C, 37 Class D. And these starports employ a 2,899,605 citizens of the Reach. There are 460 stars, 3,663 identified planets, and of those star systems, 204 of them are monostellar, 113 of them are binary, there are 10 trinary, and 0 systems with 4 or more stars. 82% have native gas giants. Those are just the dry stats of the Trojan Reach. You can look here at the Atlas of the Third Imperium. These are all of the sectors in the control of the Third Imperium. Here are some of the high laws. Firstly, it establishes the Emperor as the peak of the power structure. Secondly, establishes the Imperial military forces, the Navy, Marines, and Army, and the Imperial Interstellar Scout Service, and the law and rules of war and expansion. So, I think that the Navy, Marines, and Army of the Imperium, pretty self-explanatory. But that Interstellar Scout Service, the Imperial Interstellar Scout Service, the IISS, a little less so, they're basically sent out to survey worlds and give them a hexadecimal code that people, astrogators on starships, can use to understand more about a planet or star system before they enter it. Thirdly, the High Laws establish a system of taxes and tribute. And finally, the High Laws describe the authority that has been delegated to the archdukes, subsector dukes, counts, and barons. So if you are familiar with kind of like the Dune universe, the Landsdraad is a good example of that. There are a number of planets, there are royal families, nobles, nobilities throughout the galaxy that are of some relation to the Emperor in some way, or the Emperor's family in some way. Now let's talk a little bit about the other empire in the Trojan Reach, the Aslani Hierate. These are the Aslan. As you can see, they are very cat-like. They are descended from a creature they evolved from a creature that was not dissimilar from our lions and tigers on our planet. This is their map of their empire. As you can see, it's pretty large. This is not... Oh, wait, this is including the Trojan Reach. This is what they call the Trojan Reach. I am not going to attempt to pronounce any of these names. But I just wanted to include this so you get an idea. Like, this is another major polity. They are another major empire. Let's talk about their polity at a glance. This is what an Aslan might look like in armor. Alright. The Aslan polity is driven by expansionism, which itself is driven by Salic primogeniture and a cultural, possibly genetic, predisposition to value the ownership of expansive tracts of land over all other measurements of wealth. Let's talk about that for a second. Salic primogeniture basically means that firstborn males inherit all property. That creates a lot of issues for their culture. And I wouldn't say necessarily issues, but like it drives expansion for a few reasons. The Ihati are males of the Aslan who did not inherit land. They are allowed to possess land if they conquer it. And so there are large groups of these young, non-land inheriting males who are seeking glory through usually battle in order to gain land holdings of their own. This has driven Aslan expansion for thousands of years. That is why their empire is so large. It is not because they are like a huge economic force. We'll get into that in a second. Honor fueled by complex rules of conduct that govern behavior that has been described as violently monocultural. So they have like one way of doing things and looking at things, and anything outside of that is like viewed as very taboo. Territoriality and internal competition between clans. The Hird is composed of countless clans ruled by landowning males who themselves are overseen by a council composing representatives of the 29 strongest clans. So there's every few years there is a large gathering of the top clans, and they are the governing body. And at this meeting, any disputes that have been unable to be settled by the clan are settled by this gathering of the 29 strongest clans. Let's talk a little bit about what this kind of means for the female Aslan. The female Aslan do in some parts view themselves as subjugated. However, from a Terran viewpoint, they would be the rulers of the Aslan polity. So this is a little weird. And kind of difficult to explain, but I'll do my best. The Aslan don't value money in the same way that we do. They care more about land, specifically arable land. So let's say you had an acre of land with nothing on, literally nothing built on it. No wells, no anything. That is worth more than a city block composed of a skyscraper that is able to pull in through trade and economic maneuvering billions of credits worth of goods and just money, like revenue, a year. That is worth less to their culture than the acre of land with nothing on it. That doesn't mean that those skyscrapers do not exist. They absolutely do. They are filled with women because the males of their society do not use money, don't know what money is, don't understand money at all. If you play as an Aslan male character, you have to have points in a special skill that allow you to try to understand money. If you are a female Aslani character, you automatically understand money. And so from a Terran perspective, from a human, Soleimani, or like the Terran Empire perspective, the females are the real rulers of the Aslani polity because they have all of the like technical power, all of the economic power, they control all the businesses, they control all the trade. But in their society, the males are the ones who are viewed as the controllers of the society because they have control, just de facto control, over all of the arable land and all of the land in general. So It's just really alien, right? They look like something from our planet. They look like tigers. They look like lions. They have the manes. They have the ears. They have everything. But their culture is so alien to what we understand as humans, and they are the one that I would say are they have the most human culture of any of the aliens in Traveler. And to play as one of them requires like a flow chart to understand like how they view gender and their own cultural like ideas of how things are supposed to go, and like how angrily they would respond to perceived slights, how something might be a perceived slight rather than an actual slight, like this whole very complex system that is a challenge to roleplay for players wanting to engage in. The other aliens, I would say, while they have even more alien cultures, are easier to play. Simply just for how their cultures work. Like the Vargar, who are the dog equivalent to the Aslan, they value charisma more than anything else in their society. And I think that there's an element of humans that understand that. Like, for humans, we social standing, which is basically like your economic class in a way, but also is based on your standing in certain organizations and nobilities, things like that. It's we're more focused on that than the Aslan are. So let's talk about the delicate balance of power between the Imperium, which has a loyalty of 45% of the Trojan Reach, and the Aslani Hierate, which has a loyalty of 34% of the Trojan Reach. Um, the Imperium, hoping to avoid another border war, tries to slow the inexorable advance of the Hierate by either placating them with gifts or diverting their growth into unclaimed space. The major break on Aslani expansion is the Treaty of Faharl, which guarantees that Aslan claims will never come within 30 light years of the Imperial borders. And that is why the Trojan Reach exists in the way that it does today, with so many independent worlds very precariously set between these two major empires. And that's where the story begins, with this, again, a delicate balance of power. There is also a third player, the General Development Company, an independent corporation operating across the sector on many different worlds. This is also known as Jedico, and they build starports, they build space stations, and just different things. They invest in infrastructure, and they are just a company interested in creating a more robust infrastructure within the independent worlds of the Trojan Reach. That is how they exist in the Trojan Reach. And then finally, how's life in the far future? Making a living in deep space. As a traveler, you are different in that you are leaving your home world. You're not going to live there anymore. And you've chosen this life. You're going to come up with a reason as to why. But this is not the way that most people choose to live their lives. And you're going to have to come up with a reason as to why your character particularly has chosen to do this. But making a life as someone who doesn't live on a single planet can be difficult. And so let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, the jump drive. This is what allows you to travel from solar system to solar system. And the way that it works has far-reaching implications for how the universe of Traveler works in general. Let's talk about that at first, actually, before we get into operations. The jump drive always takes 1 week. It doesn't matter how powerful your jump drive is. You can have the most powerful jump drive. You're making like 8 parsec jumps at a time. It still takes 1 week. You got the weakest and you're only making a 1 parsec jump. Still takes a week. If you're not even making a full parsec jump, if you're just making like a sub jump from one planet in a solar system to another planet in that same solar system, it is still going to take you a week. So get out your calculators and figure out whether or not you're actually saving time by doing those sub jumps. Um, that's Here's the far-reaching implication. If the emperor of the universe is murdered, you don't know about it for like a year. Literally, information just sure it can travel at the speed of light or maybe even a little faster, but that doesn't mean it's instantaneously traveling across the entire galaxy. Now, how accurate is this? Current scientific advancements suggest that instantaneous information transfers are potentially possible using what is called quantum entanglement. In Traveler, which was based on sci-fi books that were written at the turn of the century and the mid-century, and has changed very little through its different editions. I mean, they're all pretty much the same universe. They all kind of build on one another and add more to that universe, but it's stayed the same. That's not a thing. Quantum entanglement, instantaneous information transfer, not possible. So don't worry about that. It's going to take like a year and a half to find out something that happened in the core worlds if you're living on the border. So that's something to think about and to consider. Jump drive operation is pretty dangerous. You need to figure out the safest path from point A to point B. This is astrogation, and your astrogation, if you do it very well, will help out with the other steps, minus this one. Diverting power, because it's going to take a lot of energy. You got to like dim the lights and divert power from the other systems. So you're probably not going to be like using your thrusters and stuff. It makes it difficult to jump out of a battle, basically. And then jump. Fire up those J drives and take the warp to jump space. Wonderful stuff, right? Here's some safety measures you need to be aware of. Keep up with your monthly ship maintenance. It's a very simple system in Traveler where you need to make enough money to pay for your bills, but also your ship maintenance. If you're not making enough money to pay for both of these things, you have a problem. You are in grave danger because the bank will send people after you, and your ship could potentially, bad stuff could happen. A missed jump could happen. You could end up who knows how far off course. Only use refined fuel. Using unrefined fuel imparts negative bonuses, and if you don't have fuel scoops and something to refine that fuel on your ship, I suggest picking up those upgrades as soon as possible. And finally, never jump within a gravity well. Basically, this is saying that if you're near a planet, you need to make sure that you are 100 diameters of that planet away from the center of that planet before you can attempt to jump. This will keep you out of the gravity well. Being within a gravity well will cause you to misjump, potentially. However, this creates an excellent time, or rather, let me rephrase that. This creates a time when ships are very vulnerable, either heading from their jump location, going to their destination, or going from their destination to where their jump point is going to be. And ships are pretty vulnerable during this stage. Here are some 4 mostly legal ways to make money in space. Number 1, passengers. Low, medium, and high passage for living humans who pay if they arrive that way still. This means, alright, let me break these down. Low passage, you're frozen in a cryo sleeper, and it's going to take a medical check to wake these people up, so make sure you have a doctor on board before you take on low passengers. Medium passage is like you get a little room, it's fine. High passage, those are better rooms. On the ship in the campaign, there are high and medium passage. I don't remember if we have cryo sleepers, but you can always add them. You can always add these. And because Traveler was kind of built around the ship system, it's possible to design your own spaceship using nothing but a Traveler rulebook and some graph paper. So if you're interested in that, definitely look into it. 2. Freight. You can pick up cargo and drop it off in time to receive a set amount of pay. This includes mail. It's like being a trucker, a space trucker. And this is pretty easy to do. It doesn't pay super well, but if you have the space and you're in an area that like doesn't have much else, it's actually pretty useful to take on these jobs. Naturally, there are ships that are built just for picking up maximum amount of freights, and you can just be a space trucker and traveler if that's what you want to do. That being said, if you ever catch an idea like that and you're like, oh wow, I would love to do like a campaign like that, but I can't think of anybody who would want to run it. You don't need a dungeon master or game master or whatever to play traveler. These rules are very simulationist, and if you understand how they work, you can run traveler for yourself and lose like easily, absolutely. You can lose running traveler for yourself, and I think that makes it such an exciting game to run at the table because I don't know what's going next. I don't know what's going to happen. But 3 is speculative trading. This is like freight, except you cut out one of the middlemen. You find a broker on a planet or a starport or a space station. You buy goods that you think are at a low price, and you go somewhere where they need that stuff and they're willing to pay a high price. There is a very detailed economic trade system that Traveler has baked right into it that is absolutely amazing to use at the table, and you can make a lot of money. You can fund your whole ship using speculative trading. And whatever stupid adventures your whole party wants to go on, just speculative trading. Like one person doing speculative trading, just like your players are going to be like, everyone's going to want to like use the cargo bay. Like, I want to put a flying car in the cargo bay. I want to put my special cow that I got on this alien planet in the cargo bay. And they can, but that's going to eat into that money you make speculative trading. And finally, smuggling, which just adds an extra step to speculative trading, which is sneak through customs. And there is, again, another fantastic system in Traveler for doing all of that. Every planet has a law level, and that law level acts as like a difficulty check in order to sneak in past customs, and it adds so much to the game. And then there's a very legal way. There's a very illegal way to make money, and that's piracy. You gotta be really smooth to get rich doing this and not end up dead or in prison. This is not recommended, but it is very possible. You can make some great money. Here's 5 quick steps for piracy. 1, come within range of your quarry. This is usually done in the 100 diameter range of a body in space, preferably like a decently sized planet to give you a lot of wiggle room. Ships will be coming in with goods to sell and leaving with goods to sell. So you're going to want to come within range of those ships. You're going to want to disable those ships' electronic system and force the crew to surrender. Then match their velocity, dock, loot the cargo, and escape. Those are the 5 steps in that order for a very smooth and quick and easy, painless piracy attack. Will it always work like that? You'll have to wait and see. And that brings us to the end of part 1. Thank you so much for sticking with me through all of this. I hope that this has been entertaining at least, and that you're intrigued with the Traveler universe. We're going to go into some more localized detail in the next part, and I'll hope that you stick around for us with that. Stick around with us for that as well. Thank you so much, and have a good evening. Okay, so let's continue on then. Do you have any questions about just Traveler in general? If you do, feel free to comment them below, and I'll respond to them as soon as I read them. Uh, again, I probably already mentioned this. Check out the Traveler Wiki. There's loads of great information there. A lot of it is sourced, and you can use those sources to then track down and find the books that might have more information. I can get into that when we get to it. But let's just quickly go over everything that we talked about in part one. This is a game about spaceships, where D&D is a game about your adventurers and the adventuring party and the makeup of your party. This game is way more about the spaceship than it is your character, in a lot of different ways. So if you die, this spaceship lives. If the spaceship loses its hit points, it rarely explodes and then can be found by a future party. There's a lot of ways to continue the game in Traveler, but a lot of it centers around the spaceship. You're not going to earn experience points. You're going to earn money that you can use to pay off your spaceship or upgrade your spaceship, things like that. Everything ties way more into the advancement of your spaceship and the equipment on the spaceship rather than the advancement of your character. And that's something to keep in mind if you're used to other RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons. This game is set 3,605 years into the future. Things have changed, but not really all that much. It's the future. It is the far future, but we're not talking Dune. Dune is set way further into the future, and things are really different and kind of alien while still being human. This is very much so like, oh, there's a big government and then some smaller governments, and there's a lot of parallels to be drawn to our lives today. And I think that that's something that all good sci-fi does, is it's in the future, but it still kind of ties into who we are as humans and what our lives are like. Sci-fi is about us. It takes place in the Trojan Reach sector between two large factions. That's more specific to this campaign. The Trojan Reach is a sector of space that lies between the Third Imperium and the Aslan Hierate. And there's a lot of tensions there. But due to several treaties, they're not allowed to get any closer than they currently are. So there is this kind of belt known as the Sindalian Main, or the Dust Belt, that of basically a chain of worlds that runs in between these two major empires. And that is where the majority of the action for the campaign is going to take place. And life's pretty okay. People in the far future, this is known as the Golden Age. What historians looking back will call this age is the Golden Age. And it's a time when Traveler, the RPG, takes place. People can get a ship relatively easily and then travel the galaxy if they desire, or you can just live on your home planet and just be a normal person. There are no galaxy changing events going on right now. Everything is pretty okay, and that's where our story begins. Everything is fine. Nothing horrible is on the horizon that we know of. There is no massive threat to the galaxy. There is no giant evil empire depending on your character's personal opinions. And everything's all right. We're not on the brink of a civilization galactic collapse like the Long Night. That is a distant memory. All right, and so let's go ahead and just get started. Let's zoom in even further into the Trojan Reach and start talking about the kingdom of Drinax, or Drinax. I'm going to call it Drinax because I think that sounds better. It's also known as the Kingdom of Sindal in Exile. And if you remember, I mentioned that the chain of worlds that runs in between these two polities is called the Sindalian Main. And we're going to get into why that is right now. This is the crest of the of Drinax currently, but we're going to talk about the rise and fall of the Sindalian Empire. Currently, there is no empire in between the Aslani Hierate and the Third Imperium, but that was not always the case. The year -2000 on the Imperial calendar, so this is roughly 3,000 years ago. This is almost around our time. The Sindalians were a barbarian raiders who crowned themselves kings and conquered several dozen worlds in a sector known today as the Trojan Reach. Then, not long after, the Second Imperium begins to collapse, and then we see the Sindalian revolts. The Long Night begins, and then the Sindalian revolts. After a violent and reactionary decision by the Empire of Sindal to attempt to bomb its own vassals into a state of submission, the Sindali revolts is what they're called. Basically, the old Sindalian Empire tried to had several vassal planets who were being, from their perspective, a little bit uppity. So they bombed them from orbit in an attempt to get them to pay more taxes. It's really, and you'll say this is a repeating theme. After that, we have the fall of Sindal. The capital city, or I'm sorry, the capital planet, Noricum, is razed. The empire collapses, and the regional Duke of Drinax claims the imperial title. And for more than 2 millennium, the kings of Drinax ruled over their domain, guarding their vassal worlds from invaders and pirates. For most of the reign, the kings were wise and well loved. So, Drinax is a planet within the Empire of Sindal. Sindal falls. Noricum is razed. Another way you could put this is glassed, although they did not use nuclear weapons, so the dirt and sand on the planet wasn't turned into glass. But high potency lethal weapons were used on the planet of Noricum, and not all life was wiped out, but this is no longer the seat of an empire, of any empire, except perhaps an empire over livestock and sheep. Things have changed on Noricum, and you'll see that as you travel the sector. And people liked the kings of Drinax. And I'll show you a map of how this empire has kind of decayed over time. This is then 1,000 years, close to, what is this? This is going to be 2,105 years ago. The Aslani enter the Reach and begin growing their holds in the region. So, the Aslan crossed the Great Rift, that giant claw-shaped area with very few stars. And they did this so that they could conquer more tracts of arable land. As we've discussed previously, that is the main driving force of their culture. And that manifests itself mechanically where they have a different set of core attributes for their characters. A human character in Traveler has a stat called social standing, and that represents like how up you are on the totem pole. The Aslani have territory, and it represents how much territory they or their next closest male relative currently owns, and that's how their society views power. So they cross the rift, they enter into the sector, and they start to basically threaten the lands of Drinax. In the intermediate period, the Long Night ends and the Third Imperium begins. So the Third Imperium is now a player at this point. The Aslan Hierate begins to expand into the Tylawaha subsector, which is the subsector that Drinax is in, I believe. Yes, it is. And they begin to trade with the Third Imperium. So trade is now traveling through the Sindalian Main between these two major empires, and a lot of money can be had. This is when Galaxo the Vengeful starts using the old tactics of Sindal and begins to bomb their vassals to keep them in line. The kingdom then becomes increasingly unruly in the face of the growing Aslani threat, and the outer worlds break away from the cruel yoke of the king. So even further, the Drinaxi Empire, just like Sindal before them, begins to tighten the reins far too tightly, and they try to bomb their vassals into submission. At which point the vassals are like, we're leaving, we're going to be better off with different leaders. And the kingdom begins to decay even further. This is when a new king, King Oleb the 14th, puts a tax on the Aslan. Aslan trade is traveling from the Hyrate to the Imperium through this area, and the king puts on a very steep tax on trade through the region that he controls. This leads the Aslan to glass Drinax, the planet. It was a garden world, meaning it is very like Earth. We live on a garden world. Plants grow very easily here. No longer. They took, Coruscant from Star Wars and turned it into the road. It's mad. They Mad Maxed the planet. It's horrible now. Nothing survived for the most part. There's some algae, there's some cave creatures, there's some moss and fungus, and then there's the Vespexers who still live there to this day, and that's it. And 885 IC really wasn't that long ago when you think about it. It's currently 1105, so that was only like a couple hundred years ago. It's still in recent memory. Then, this is like 20 years ago at this point. King Oleb reconquers the planet of Asim after the Drinaxi hydroponic gardens fail. So let's talk a little bit about how the Kingdom of Drinax is still a thing after their seat of power was destroyed. So remember, Noricum is destroyed, and their empire, crumbles the only reason it survives is because the kings of Drinax are like, no, we are the leaders of the empire now, and our kingdom is the new kingdom. We're taking on all the claims to fame. Well, then they do the same thing, and then they get bombed. All that is left is a single city, spared because it flies, a floating city for the richest of the empire of Drinax. No more. It is all that is left. Any survivors from the surface came to the floating palace. The floating palace is now a smorgasbord, a mishmash of different classes all living in one space. There are golden statues multiple stories high, with dozens of clotheslines tied onto them, clothes drying in the open air. Fantastic tapestries and works of art being used as makeshift tents on the street. And that is how things have been since 885. This is all that is left of Drinax, is a single flying city. And that flying city does not have the infrastructure required to keep it going forever. And that portent of the future came to fruition in 1085 when the Drinaxi hydroponic gardens failed. The only source of fresh food for the entire kingdom of Drinax, everybody who lives on the floating city, was going to starve to death, ostensibly, without a massive increase in trade, which the kingdom cannot afford. They have sold what few works of art haven't been sold just to keep this place running are just they can't be parted with. It's just like they're that important. So the current king, King Oleb the 16th, reconquered the nearby world of Asim, which is a garden world, and was under the cruel yoke of an organization known as the Foundation. They got their name and, in fact, entire concept for their scheme from an Isaac Asimov book of the same name. They told the citizens of Asim that they had a 1,000-year plan for the betterment of all of humanity. This was all a farce and a simple kind of religious coding to give them power, infinite power on that world that they controlled. And that was the case up until King Oleb reconquers the planet of Asim in a ground invasion, led by what small military he had. The kingdom of Asim, or the planet of Asim, didn't have much of a military to speak of, so the war lasted a very short time, and he was able to reconquer Asim. And now it is his. And now the people of Asim, they do subsistence farming for themselves, they trade with other planets, but they also send a hefty amount of food to the floating palace in order to keep the kingdom alive. So as you can see, this paints a very clear picture of an empire in decay. And here's a map that I wish I could have kind of showed you this whole time. This light gray area that stretches pretty much over the entire map. This is Sindal. This is the Empire of Sindal. This is where it used to be. This planet right here is Noricum. This is where the seat of the Empire used to be. And it is believed to spread this wide. After Noricum is destroyed, it's this. This dark gray area, this small cluster of worlds where Drinax was the seat. Currently, even this is gone, and it is only Drinax and Asim, and it is such a small empire in quotes, kingdom in quotes, that it's not even shown on the map. They don't even bother listing it. Which is kind of, I don't know if it depends on what your view on empires are. It was helpful to have an empire in the area to allow for trade between these planets, so that planets that wouldn't normally be able to advance themselves technologically could. But again, there's differing opinions on all of this, and your opinion on all of this matters a lot to how the campaign is going to go. Your character's opinions even more. Let's talk about the planet that's left. This is what Drinax looks like today. Not unlike Dune. This is a map. This is what all the planetary maps look like. I like that they generate the planet maps like this. There's a website that does this based on the Universal World Code profile that all planets have, and it's even accurate enough that you can cut this out and make a little papercraft model of the planet, which I find very cute, and I've seen people have done that with like homebrew worlds and stuff. So yeah, you're seeing deserts, rocky mountains, that's it. Deserts, rocky mountains, there's maybe some canyons and stuff here and there, and like some unique things, some ruins perhaps, but not a whole lot. There's some kind of starport, there's some kind of area for you to land, but that's it. The Vespexers are a tribes that live here on the planet. They do exist. They are out here. They're trying to do what they can to seed new life on the planet, but it is slow work. It's not like they do not have the ability to just terraform this world back to the way it was. They're trying to do so. Pun intended, a very grassroots kind of movement. And it's not going super well so far. They haven't been at it for very long on a planetary timescale. Let's talk about the floating palace now. This is what it looks like. Very nice looking from the outside. But when you get inside, you start to realize that like there's a lot more people living here than should be. You have the throne room in the middle. If you want, you can get a better look at all this stuff. This map exists in the campaign. I can have it. If you have this campaign, you can get a lot better view of all this stuff. But I'll just touch on a few of these more important areas. There's the Starport docks, the Royal docks, the throne room in the middle, the Scholars Tower, which is like the kind of college of the area. That's where all of their information is kept and knowledge. There's the gravity dungeons, because this is a floating palace. It does have a gravity well, and it does have gravity generators. And the further towards the center you are, the more the gravity is. So they put people in the gravity dungeons where the gravity is very, very high, and then they are kind of slowly crushed. It's not great, honestly, but that's the gravity dungeons. This is the current king, King Oleb the 16th. we're gonna go over really quickly the court of Drinax, the royals, the people who are pulling the strings here. And I, again, have all of this information laid out for you in that PDF, so you want to be a space pirate, and you can go back and look at this at any time, and it will be pretty helpful. I won't read all of this out to you, but I'll kind of give it to you in my words. King Oleb the 16th, he is the ruler of the Kingdom of Drinax. He is very, 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 very clearly inspired heavily by Robert Baratheon from the first season of Game of Thrones. That's the best way to describe this guy. His character is basically just that. If you've seen the first season of Game of Thrones, he's Robert Baratheon. Maybe he's not the best king, but he's the king currently. He doesn't take himself too seriously. There's a lot of sardonicism there, and I wouldn't give him. I don't know what his stats are, but I wouldn't say he's got a lot of points in either education or intelligence. He's a former pugilist. I think he may have taken a lot of headshots. Prince Herrick. I will read a little bit about this because he's in a very interesting situation. He led the assault on a sim 20 years ago. And he was shot down. He was mortally wounded. And all but killed. Think, Anakin Skywalker in that third Star Wars movie at the end. That's what I'm like. He's a husk. He was like RoboCop in the RoboCop remake, but they put him in the tanks. They like regrew him like a clone body or something. It's not super clear what they did to this guy, but he's back. Is he better than ever? Absolutely not. Is he more human than human? No, he is not. He's there though. He's definitely a figurehead, a very malleable, easily swayed figurehead, in my opinion. And then we have my personal favorite character, Princess Rao. Princess Rao wants to see a new Drinaxi empire rise from the ashes of the old. She wants to see a more equal and progressive league to either provide a bulwark against the great imperial powers, and also to bring the advanced technology of Drinax back to their former subjects, and a new golden age. She has a lot of high hopes for what the current situation could lead to. Right now, things are dire. The Empire, the Court of Drinax, the Kingdom of Drinax is on its very, very last legs, and they need to do something pretty crazy if they're ever going to get back on top. Because right now, it's like they are honestly one attack away from this city falling to the planet's surface and everybody dying, and Drinax just being a memory. Honestly. Like, really, one good, guerrilla terrorist action could bring down the entire floating palace. It is not that stable of, a place to have an empire. That being said, it hasn't happened yet, and Princess Rao views her position in life as a potential boon for the empire, for everyone in the Trojan Reach. She has high hopes for everyone, and she has kind of manipulated her father into reviving classical piracy by giving a letter of marque to a small group of people. And that is the impetus for the entire campaign. The Court of Drinax. Minor figures. We got a lot of minor figures. Let's go through them very quickly. Lord Rax commands the Star Guard, which is the naval forces of Drinax. Scholar Voa is the elderly master of the Scholar's Tower and the person who wrote the guide So You Want to Be a Space Pirate. Casil of the Ahore is an exiled Aslan from the Hierate. His family clan is very prominent. Nobody knows why he left his family or why he was exiled, and he refuses to elaborate. He's currently sleeping on someone's porch. like their patio like overlook in the palace. Like he's like literally camped out there in a tent. The Imperial Consul Thalpolos represents the Third Imperium at court. Um, the capital is very, very far away from Drinax. Even the Imperial Governor at Pax Rulin is many weeks distant. Uh, it's not high on the Imperium's list of plum assignments. Um, but that's it. The current consul is a historian who traveled here to study the last remnants of Sindal. His presence is a reminder that these are probably the final days of a once glorious empire. So basically, he's a historian here documenting the fall of Sindal. You know, he's going to write this great big series of books, the rise and fall, or the what is it, the rise and decline of the Sindalian Empire, or whatever it is. Like, he's going to write that equivalent. You've got Lady Hill is an influential noble in the court who has little time for anyone who cannot trace their lineage all the way back to the old Empire of Sindal. She is in deep denial about the current state of things. She thinks that everything's great. She's kind of like very about protocol and, you know, nobility and the forks and the spoons and the knives going in the right place and all that stuff that a lot of people would rather like forget about the old like aristocracy style traditions, but she holds on to them. Then there's Ranchando, who is a trader with no noble title or aristocratic lineage, but he has his own bazaar. He's kind of somehow become the linchpin of the local economy, and yeah, he controls the entire bazaar. It's actually called Richando's Bazaar. Then there's Cleon Hardy. Cleon Hardy is the ombudsman for the planet of Asim. He brings the concerns to the court, and he is the representative of that planet. He was an economist and broadcaster before. He is out of his depth in a strange court on the floating palace, but he is learning rapidly. Then there is Sal Danset, who is a free trader and smuggler using the floating palace for repairs and a hiding place. She can obtain rare goods and commodities from across the Trojan Reach and is an excellent source of rumors and information. Finally, we have Chieftain Galax, who is the representative of the Vespexer tribes of the surface, visiting the floating palaces when it travels over her territory. So the floating palace is kind of almost in orbit. It's rotating around the planet, and occasionally it travels over her territory, and she travels up to the floating palace to meet with the court. Let's talk a little bit about the province of Asim while we're here. And I want to bring up these as well. This is a universal planetary profile code. It is in hexadecimal notation, and it will literally tell you everything you'd possibly need to know about a planet. I'll break this down for you in just a moment. It's not 100% necessary that you learn how to decode these. It does add a little bit of immersion to the game, but there are tons of guides online. The Traveler Map website, for one, you can click on any solar system and it will give you the main UPP completely broken down for you. This UPP generates these maps. At least the first 3 numbers do. The other numbers tell you about the planet's infrastructure and government. And let's actually, if we can, yes, let's break this down right now. So, this is gonna look a little complicated, but we're literally just gonna break it down one at a time. This is the location, the system name, this is the code itself. The first digit of the code is gonna be a letter, and it's gonna show you starport quality. A is excellent, B is good, C is routine, D is poor, E is frontier, and then X is none. So there's probably, I believe, a frontier style port on the planet of Drinax, but there's also like a much nicer port on the floating palace, and that's the one that it's assuming that you're going to be using. So Drinax would have, I believe, an A. They have an A for their first digit. And then you have planetary size in kilometers, in thousands of kilometers rather. This is going to tell you the gravity of this world. The higher the number, the higher the gravity. And it looks like 8 is Earth gravity. That's 1g. Anything less is going to be a little less. You're going to be floating. Anything higher is going to be a little bit potentially dangerous. And high gravity worlds and like extremely high gravity worlds can potentially kill you or cause a lot of damage. Next you have atmosphere type. And again, this is just the one number. It goes from 0 to 15. And each one of these is a different style of atmosphere that you can encounter, from none to a very thin tainted atmosphere to a dense tainted atmosphere, or an exotic or corrosive atmosphere, insidious, very dense, low atmosphere, or unusual, which it could be anything. And then each of these is going to tell you basically a little info about the pressure. 6 is standard for Earth, but currently I think it might even be standard tainted. We'll have to wait and see. But you know, if certain parts of Earth, definitely you'd need a filter, and so this will tell you what kind of protection you need when you get out of your ship and go to a planet. The next number is the hydrographic percentage. This is what percentage of the world is water. I forget what percentage of our Earth is water. I think it's like 75% water. So we would be at a 6. And then, you know, obviously that can tell you how much water is on a planet is important. However, just because a planet has liquid on it doesn't mean it's actually water. And there are times when there's a planet that will have a hydrographic percentage that's pretty decent, but it's like a liquid of, it's like an ocean of mercury or something. Something like horrible. You're like, oh, this isn't actually that useful for us. But just so you are aware, any planet that has liquid water on it, enough of it that you can kind of submerge your ship a little bit, you can scoop up that water and then pull the hydrogen out of it and use it as fuel for your ship if you have the proper fuel scoops and then refine, and then you can refine the Jesus, I completely lost the word refine. If you have the fuel scoops and the fuel refinery on your ship, then you can any liquid water or even just hydrogen that you can find, you can turn into fuel. The final three numbers are going to give you the population density, the government, and the law level. These are pretty important, and I'll go over these really quickly. Population density is pretty self-explanatory, like 10 to the power of 9. Like, this is going to give you, like, the general gist of, like, how many people live here. Is it literally just 0 people? Or, like, 10 people, 20 people? This is, like, 100, this is 1,000. It goes up and up and up and up. Then you have the government. There are, again, like 16 different kinds of government, including none. So you can have a planet with 10 people in a participating democracy. Like, that's absolutely a thing. Or there are certain things on here that maybe you're not super familiar with, like balkanization. Earth is considered a balkanized planet because we have multiple governments, right? World governments are kind of the rule in sci-fi, just for the sake of the sanity of the people writing. Like, world governments, also known as Planet of the Hats, where it's like, oh, on this planet everyone wears a red hat because we all wear red hats, and this is the red hat planet because we all really like the band Devo. And it's like, yeah, that makes it easier to write, but it's also very, very just as much possible that there would be a balkanized planet that has maybe 2 or more governments that are either in war with each other, or they have some kind of diplomatic agreement where they both control their own half of the planet. Maybe they have varying ideological or economic differences that keeps them separated. There's tons of different reasons that are explored in Traveler, and balkanization is just like, that could mean a ton of different things. So it's good to know how many active world governments there are going to be on a planet. Captive government, a sim is a captive government because they are a government that is led by another government. Charismatic dictators, impersonal bureaucracies, non-charismatic dictators, religious dictatorships, religious autocracy, totalitarian oligarchy. Where's the weird one? Feudal technocracy. Feudal technocracy. What does that mean? That's gonna be like Dune. If you're familiar with Dune, basically they've got a king or an emperor, they've got barons, they've got dukes, but what really matters is who has the technology and are they willing to use it. And so the technology is, you don't own the tech, basically. The means of production is owned by the king and rented out to you. And that is how a feudal technocracy would work. So like any kind of like farming implements or flying cars, future tech, whatever, that's owned by the government and then that's then leased out to the people who are going to be using it. And that will give you, that government level will also kind of give you like the contraband, like the common contraband for that style. So like if it's a company, if a corporation runs a planet, they're probably not going to want drugs coming in. They're probably not going to want weapons coming in, or even travelers. They don't want regular people coming in because this is a company planet doing company business for the company, and we don't want anybody knowing what it is. It's all proprietary. So a level 1 government might not even want you there, period. Other ones, like a representative democracy, they don't want drugs, they don't want weapons, but they also don't want anyone with psionics. They don't want any mind readers, because mind readers are a threat to democracy for whatever reason. I'm not quite sure. Non-charismatic dictators, or dictators in general, they're, maybe they don't, I don't know why a common contraband is none, but impersonal bureaucracy, they don't want drugs, psionics, technology, travelers, weapons. There's all different things, and these are just common contraband items. This is like suggestions, not necessarily the rules. But then law level, and this is where these two things kind of come together. Law level is measured by how strict gun control is, and this has always been the case in Traveler since the dawn of the game back in the 70s, and I find that absolutely hilarious. So what weapons are banned dictates how strong the law level is. What the law level is dictates what the difficulty check is for smuggling, getting around security, or just doing various like administration with the planet, depending on if you're going against the law or working within it. And basically, so if you aren't allowed to have any kind of like high damage weapons, basically one is like weapons of mass destruction. Like you're not allowed to have nukes. You're not allowed to have portable energy and laser weapons at the second level. So portable energy laser weapons, you're not allowed to have any kind of laser guns at all. Then 3, they're gonna ban military style weapons. You're not allowed to have vehicle mounted submachine guns and all this ridiculous stuff. Then light assault weapons and submachine guns that aren't a vehicle mounted or whatever. Then personal concealable weapons. Then all firearms except for shotguns and stunners. And carrying weapons in general is just discouraged. Then shotguns. Then all bladed weapons and stunners. And then all weapons and all armor. And so this is definitely something to keep in mind when you're traveling planet-side. Because when you're traveling the universe, there's no rules in international space or intergalactic space. You can go out there with whatever you want, whatever you need to get done whatever you're doing. But once you land and you leave your ship, you are bound by the local laws. So if you leave your ship in full battle dress with your big old like military style like weapons, just one in each arm, like a couple slung over your shoulders, you're gonna get arrested pretty quickly on almost any planet, depending on a few dice checks. It's possible to get around it, but it's gonna lead to a lot of difficulties overall. So that's the law levels here. These down here, AGNIPRGA, what are those? Those are trade codes. Those help generate what goods are on these planets, what they're buying high, what they're selling high, what they're buying low, what they're selling low. All that is decided by these, and these are decided by this. by this string of numbers generates these codes. So what is this? This is the UPP for a sim. They are an agricultural world. They are a non-industrial world. They are, let's see, PR is, oh, they are a garden world. What is PR? Why is that not on here? Oh, they're a pre-rich world. I don't know why that's not. Oh yeah, because this is kind of like an older one. They're a pre-rich world. It's a world working towards being an industrial world, but it lacks the population to do so. So, oh, I'm sorry. No, that's wrong. That's a pre-industrial world. This is a pre-rich world. It's a world suited to becoming a rich world, but lacking the population to become rich. Hundreds of thousands, or having too many people to be rich if they're in the billions. So there's different thresholds for all of these, and this is going to help generate the trade goods which you're going to be buying and selling. Starport quality, it goes into a little bit more info here, how much it costs to dock with these starports, how much fuel costs, and what facilities they have. Can you repair your ship there, basically? And that's the UPP. Again, it's just it's a string of letters and numbers, but it gives you all of the information you need for this game to run. And I've always been very fascinated by this as a central mechanic for the game. Not 100% necessary to know as a player, but all of the tools and everything in the background of this game runs on this string of letters and numbers. And I'm going to be eternally fascinated by this. So I'll always be including information with this code. If you can figure out how to decode it and use this stuff to decode it yourselves, it's going to help you do a little guesswork on where you're going next. You know, it's like, oh, we want to avoid this planet because they have like some kind of religious dictatorship and they will murder us if we have shotguns there or something like that, you know? It gives you a good idea of where to avoid and where you want to go. So let's move on now to the next section here. The next section, we're going to talk about the ship that you're going to be starting with in the campaign. This is kind of unique in Traveler. Usually you get whatever ship that you can scrape together. And this is not going to be too different, as you'll see. But the ship that you start with is wonderful. This was discovered after a great battle in deep space long ago. The entire original crew is dead. They've been turned into skeletons by what has been calculated to be at like 300,000 MVS, or like rockins of radiation. Enough radiation to basically instantly kill the entire crew. And the problem that caused that might still be on the ship, but let's go a little bit more detail here. These are the statistical stats. These are like this is the ship's character sheet here, and I'm going to go over it real quick. The hull is 200 tons, streamlined, reinforced, with superior stealth technology. So this is a stealth craft. It can fly in atmosphere, so you can fly it on a planet, in a planet's atmosphere, and it won't fall apart. This is not a thing that all spaceships have. It's reinforced, which is going to be even better for damage. The stealth, you can already guess what that does. The bonded super dense armor is going to do damage reduction in battle. That's incredible. Thrust of 6 is similarly incredible. If thrust of 1 is shooting milk out of a straw to propel yourself through space, then thrust of 6 is having an F-16 fighter jet engine strapped to your ship. In science, in the way that physics work, both of those on a long enough time scale will get you to 99.9% the speed of light. However, F-16 fighter jet engine is going to get you there faster than blowing milk out of a straw will. So you've got the jet engine. People with thrust 1 have milk out of a straw. The next thing is the power. Oh, wait. Also, let's talk a little bit about the jump drive here. J2 is jump 2. You can jump 2 parsecs at a time. No matter the distance, it always takes a full week. You can early jump, which means you can jump inside of that 1,000 diameter limit and not incur negatives. So you can jump it very close to another person. And you can also stealth jump so that they can't track you. And then there's a size reduction to the jump drive itself so that there's extra room for cargo because the thrust 6 reduces the tonnage on the ship itself. And so the reduced size for the jump drive, because it's TL15, is going to help. And let me jump, I got a little ahead of myself. TL15, that's like the highest TL that you can hope to get a ship in the Traveler universe that isn't like some long forgotten alien technology. 15 is like you're maxing the tech level out. You're going to have a hard time repairing this ship because of how good it is. And you'll see that later on in this section. Holographic controls, think Minority Report. I'm going to jump back up. I forgot to mention the fuel tanks. You can hold enough fuel to do a jump 2 parsecs, and then run the ship for a full month afterwards. So you can, again, very good for stealth work, very good for wet work or any kind of espionage that you want to do. The power plant, fusion, again, TL15, very high level of technology, giving out 260 units of power. Again, that's incredible. You're not going to get that everywhere. The bridge has holographic controls, think Minority Report. Computer is very high, very advanced. You can add additional stuff to it for sure. Your sensors are advanced with military countermeasure suites installed already. Great for stealth. So good for stealth. So good for noticing people before they notice you, and then making sure they don't notice you. Your weapons, as we've already talked about, you've got a high-yield, accurate particle barbette turret on top, and on the bottom you've got a single-turret missile rack that can hold 12 missiles. So you can launch missiles, and you can fire your lasers, and you can hopefully defeat anybody, or at least scare them off, who might be trying to mess with you. Your systems on the ship, you've got an armory, you've got a cargo scoop, so you can scoop up cargo as it floats out in space after you blow up somebody's ship, and fuel processor. So let's say that you can only land on like some backwater world that only has like a research station there, and they don't even have processed fuel. You can process 40 tons worth of fuel per day. Your ship holds 42 tons. So in a single day, you can and maybe some change, so like we're talking like 23 hours or 28 hours maybe. You can fully have your ship full of fuel, even if they don't have perfect hydrogen fuel that's already processed. You've got a holographic hull, so you can change your ship's livery on the fly. This is super useful. You can get really creative with this. Staterooms, 8 standard staterooms up top, each with a bunk bed, so you can hold 16 people. And 8 low berths down at the bottom. Those are cryopods, so you can hold a total of 24 people on your ship. But 8 of them are going to need to be frozen. Software built into the ship's computer already. You can evade with a +1. You can fire your guns and missiles with a +2. You can jump the ship with a +2. The ship has built-in library, and you can maneuver with a +0, basically acting as an autopilot that can function both in atmosphere on a planet or out in the solar system. Common areas, you've got 8 D tons of that. Again, D tons, that's displacement tons, equaling how much, hold on, let me see the Traveler Wiki. Ton is both measurement of volume and a measurement of mass or weight with 2 primary meanings. A D-ton, or displacement ton, is a unit of volume equal to between 13.5 and 14.0 cubic meters. It is derived from the volume of a ton of liquid hydrogen, which is the most common fuel used by starships. Also, a ton is abbreviated T, is a unit of mass equal to 1,000 kilograms. So both of those are true, but in this case we're talking about displacement tons, and that is why the cargo area has 29.7 tons of space available, and that is why tons is being used as a measurement of space rather than a measurement of mass. Moving on. The upper deck features the bridge, the ship's locker, which I'll go over the weapons available in there, the officer staterooms, which are going to be bigger and nicer than the crew staterooms. Again, 16 different people can share these rooms. Storage and utility closets, particle barbette access here up top, and then a common area down at the bottom. You've got the lower deck access down here. The lower deck itself, you'll be accessing it here. You got sensor computers right underneath the bridge. You got the cargo hold, the cargo scoop, so you'll have to run cargo down to the cargo hold after you scoop it. Your fuel processors here on the side. All this gray area is holding fuel. Countermeasure suites, A and B on starboard and port side. Or, I'm sorry, port and starboard side. The main airlock, the low berths, that's the cryopods. You've got your turret access. This is going to be your missile turret. Your engineering wings featuring J drives and maneuver drives and additional power landing gear access for repairs, and then the main access to leave the ship. In those ship's lockers, you're going to have swords, you're going to have 6-shooters, you're going to have grenade launchers and shotguns. Many of these have secondary attachments and secondary firing means, but these are all wonderful breach weapons for either taking with you on landing party missions or taking with you to defend your ship from attack or to attack other ships, as you will be pirates. Action stations. When the ship comes under attack, we will need someone to be the captain, at least one pilot, also known as the first lieutenant, a navigation officer, known as the second lieutenant, the engineering officer, the second pilot, just in case something happens to the first one, the drive chief, the gunners, missile specialist, and beam gunner, the medic, also known as the chief steward of the ship, in charge of making sure everyone's both comfortable and alive, and the marines, who will also be doing additional tech and maintenance work during the battle, as we will not always be boarding the other ship, at least not until we match their velocity and open up that hull to get it to the juicy bits inside. You don't need one character for each of these places, but only one character can do each thing at a time. But, like, let's say the medic's not healing anybody right now. He can also be helping out with additional tech and maintenance. The Marine's obviously not going to be boarding the ship at every single turn. We'll be helping out with other things. Second pilot won't be piloting because the first pilot should be okay unless something happens, but you need someone to pilot. The captain will be issuing orders. These orders, due to their complexity, might have a difficulty level to roll above, and for every point you roll above that difficulty level, you can pass that on as a bonus to your companions, simulating how synergy would work on a good ship crew. And so battle becomes a little complex, almost a different game, but very, very fun and rewarding if you're all on the same page and everybody's working together. And it really feels like a kitchen if you've worked in a kitchen, or a ship if you've ever worked on a ship, which is exactly what it is supposed to be like. Now the downside to this wonderful, fantastic ship. The damage report. It is a salvaged ship, and it is in need of some tender love and care. The turret is damaged. The general systems, like everything, is just kind of wonky. The radiation did not do favors to any of the electrical components on the ship. There are microfractures in the hull, meaning the ship already has damage. And an unreliable jump drive that is potentially leaking radiation. Not a good sign, not a good thing that you want at all. Unreliable maneuver drive, the ship is hard to fly. Cosmetic repairs are needed. The ship looks a little worse for wear. There's a lot of dust. There's a lot of grime. There's a lot of oxidization of the brass, and things need to be repolished and refinished. And there are exotic repair costs due to the high technology nature of a lot of the systems on board the ship, and the level of understanding and parts needing to be imported in order to repair this ship on a planet that is at least one technology level too low to fully repair the vessel. That's it for the ship. We will go into greater detail of what these damages mean and what you will need to repair them once we have your characters made. Let's go ahead and jump into the next section. And for our final section, we're going to be talking about making a traveler, more specifically, how to not die during character creation. And so what I encourage you to do is just hear me out. I'm going to go through character creation in some pretty broad strokes, and I will let you know the major choices you're going to make and how to make informed choices that's going to keep your character alive through the character generation process. So, ability stats. Let's talk about the ability stats in Traveler because they're a little bit different than D&D, but they're also the exact same. First of all, strength is your ability to crush a tomato in your bare hand. Dexterity is your ability to throw a tomato and to hit a target at a distance with that tomato. Endurance is your ability to eat a tomato that's gone a little south and not get sick. Education is the fact that you know that tomatoes are a fruit and not a vegetable. Intelligence is you know that you shouldn't put tomatoes in a fruit salad. But your social standing is your ability to convince someone to eat a tomato-based fruit salad. Now, to generate your stats, normally you'd roll 2d6 and just plug them in straight down the line. It'd be totally random. But because I want to give you some freedom during character creation, generation, however you want to look at this, you're going to roll 12d6. Write them down and change the two lowest numbers to 5s. Then you're going to pair these numbers to the characteristics as desired. Meaning if you really want a high strength or high dexterity or higher endurance or education or intelligence, social, you can have your highest stat be the one that you want and your lowest stat be the dump stat that you want, giving you a little bit more freedom to make your character. These are your dice modifiers. It's based on a 2d6 system. And for your background skills, you basically, your first step is to make your character at age 18. And they're going to have a few skills. The higher education your character has means the more acumen that they have, the more of these skills you get to pick. For example, if you had a score of 12 education, you would get +2. It'd be +2 +3 equals 5 of these. I'll run through what these mean real quick. Admin is administration. It's bureaucracy. Your ability to do paperwork. Animal is animal husbandry. Your ability to care for animals, including riding them. Flyer is any vehicle that flies through the air. It can be a flying car, it can be an ornithopter like in Dune, it can be anything that flies. Language is your ability to speak a language. Again, you have this ability at 0. This is not your mother tongue. This is another language that you've learned. Mechanic is your ability to fix any kind of mechanical devices. It's a very broad skill. It applies to a lot of different things. Engineering applies to very specific things, but mechanic is a very broad stroke. Medic, again, this is like a very broad stroke for any kind of medical skill. Profession is any skill that you have that's not a creative profession, so you're not busking, but anything else that you could roll the dice and generate income for yourself. Think asteroid mining, or 3D printing, working with polymers, or I guess technically working as a chef, but I think that would potentially be artistry. It's complicated. Science is similarly complicated. It is as complicated, far-reaching, and in-depth as the actual field of science itself. So we will cover that based on what kind of character you want to create. Seafarer is like a survival skill for the ocean and your ability to use vehicles for traveling the sea. Streetwise is your survival skill for urban environments. Survival is your survival skill for rural environments or wilderness environments, or even some kinds of space environments as well. Vac suit is your ability to use a vacuum suit in either a 0G or underwater environment. And then once you have your character at 18, you're going to decide whether or not you want to apply pre-career options. You can jump right into a career, or you can go to university. There's a standard university option. You'll need to roll to get in. You'll need to roll to graduate. You're not guaranteed to graduate. You might drop out. Military academy, same deal. Taking a university, though, will help you get into a career. It can help set you down a very successful path. In the military, if you graduate with honors, you basically automatically become a commissioned officer. That's awesome. That'll unlock additional skills that you can get. Merchant Academy, similar to Standard or Military Academy, except it's specifically going to help you get set up to be in the Merchant Marines, or as a merchant, or a free trader, or a broker. Who knows? Colonial upbringing is like you grew up on a planet that they were colonizing. You grew up as like a roughneck, living tough. I believe colonial upbringing actually starts your character progress at age 16 rather than 18, so it's a little bit different. Spacer community, you grew up in space, either as a belter, mining asteroids, or just in some kind of space colony. There's orbital cities all over. This changes you. All this stuff changes who you are as a person in moderate ways. Your stats will go up. Your education stat will increase. Your social standing will increase or decrease based on these, especially the School of Hard Knocks, which is like the urban survival equivalent. Like, you grew up hard, you grew up rough in a rough and tumble area, and you have the skills and acumen to account for it. Then you get to decide what career you take. Each career has a library of skills that you can and cannot access based on your stats, based on your previous history, and you will be expected to make a series of rolls in order to go through random events based on what career you pick. The random events are very specific to that career. Then you'll need to make a survival roll. You may have a mishap, again, specific to your career path. And then you'll need to make a roll to decide whether or not you advance down that career path. The more you advance down a career path, the more goods and money you will start the game with. So doing well on all of these rolls is kind of essential for getting the character that you want to have. But failing on any of these rolls isn't necessarily the end of your character or the end of your character's life, as it were. Failing in a career might be a wonderful reason for your character to start a new career as a traveler, or as a pirate, or as a corsair, or just the beginning of the campaign. However you want to do it. You can change careers. Is equivalent to like cross-classing in another role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. So you can be a rogue and someone who's in the Navy. You can have both of those sets of skills, and that can have a lot of positive implications for the way that you build your character. You can either plan on doing that, or I would recommend staying in a career as long as you can, and if things don't go the way that you want, to dip out. You can stay in a career as long as you want. Each term is 4 years, and your character doesn't start aging until they hit the age of 34, at which point your stats will then again begin to change based on your aging. Your physical stats will start going down. Eventually your mental stats will as well, but that's much further down the line. I actually don't. I think that's homebrew rules, actually, for being older than 74. I cap it at 74. You're done at 74. I don't want people playing, like super octogenarian, like space travelers. Like, you can if you really want to in another campaign, but look, I'm going to have everybody between the age of like 16 and 74 in this campaign. We're going to have it in between there. Let's start talking about these descriptions of these choices you're going to have. Each one of these options, so agent is the career. Law enforcement, intelligence, and corporate is the assignment. Each assignment has different thresholds you need to roll to survive and advance. And I will show you where you can look all that stuff up at, but I'm not going to go over it here because it belongs in the books. But yeah, I'm also giving you examples from pop culture of each kind of assignment as best as I can. We'll run through these as quick as I can. Law enforcement, you got RoboCop. You're a cop. You're a law enforcement officer. Intelligence agent, you got James Bond. This is that Ian Fleming sketch of James Bond, because I didn't want to choose favorites, but my favorite is Roger Moore. I don't care what you think. It's Roger Moore is the best James Bond. Timothy Dalton's good too. Inception is a corporate agent, corporate espionage. You're getting info for a corporate client of some kind. Thinking Inception. That's the sci-fi example I can think of. Army support, someone running the lines for communication. This is Pauly Shore in a film called In the Army Now, because I couldn't think of a better example in sci-fi for sure. If you have one, please. I want to get Pauly Shore out of here. Infantry, we've got the Rebels from Hoth, the Battle on Hoth, and Empire Strikes Back in Star Wars. Classic example of sci-fi trench warfare there. The Cavalry, I've got the novel Hammer Slammers by David Drake. He was a Vietnam War veteran who wrote a series of sci-fi novels about tank warfare in a sci-fi settings, but it's based on his own lived experiences. Believers. This is a bonus career path that is featured in the Traveler Companion book, and I'm throwing it out there. If you want to give it a shot, but it's gonna be one of those things where if you want to take this path, we'll confirm it with everybody else because we'll see what kind of game they want to be playing and whether or not they want to be playing something like this. Two of these examples are from Dune because there's not a lot of religion in sci-fi, but a believer in like a mainstream religion. I've got the Orange Catholic Bible, which is the main religion from Dune that everyone in the Land's Rad believes in until the events of the novel Dune. Then we've got missionary/humanitarian aid. I've got the film Living in Emergency, but really the MSF or Doctors Without Borders is the example that I would give for this humanitarian aid. It's not necessarily a religious thing, but they have a very strong belief, Doctors Without Borders, that doctors should be there in war zones as neutral parties to aid both sides and to bear witness to the horrors of war. That's what MSF is. It's not a religious organization, but they are believers in a higher calling than themselves. Holy Warriors, you got the Fedaykin from Dune. They're riding sandworms. They're killing everybody. They're traveling on their holy war across the galaxy, a battle of unquenchable fire. Self-explanatory. Citizen, we got corporate citizens like this guy from Omni Consumer Products from the film RoboCop. We've got the workers from Nostromo, from the film Alien, and then I believe that this is a quick screen grab from The Expanse. We've got the colonists on Mars. Examples from sci-fi from the last 100 years. Of these citizens that you could potentially play as a boring person if you wanted. Then if you fail to get into any of these, because you do need to roll to qualify, then you have the option of becoming a drifter. You could be a barbarian like Riddick in the Chronicles of Riddick, a wanderer like Max from Mad Max, or a scavenger like Kevin Costner in Waterworld, or like Max from Mad Max. They're technically both scavengers, but Kevin Costner is a better example. Entertainment. We've got artists. This can be a lot of different things. This is pretty far-reaching because you could be a chef and an artist. If you worked at a hibachi place, you'd be a performer as well. But we've got I forget the name of the character, but this lady who designs dreams for the replicants in Blade Runner 2049, also directed by Denis Villeneuve. Journalist, you've got Transmetropolitan. I forget what this guy's name is, but he's basically a Hunter S. Thompson analog in a cyberpunk world. In a comic book written by Warren Ellis that it's decent. It's a decent read. It's definitely very interesting transhumanist cyberpunk comic book writing, and it's got a great art style. Then performer, I have not seen The Fifth Element all the way through, but this is Chris Rock's character from The Fifth Element as an example of a performer in a sci-fi setting. Marines, there's a lot of Space Marines, but here's a support guy. He's running the line. He's making sure everyone's communicating. For Star Marines, we've got Halo. Look at him out there. It's Halo. And then for Ground Assault, we've got the Space Marines from... Or I think they're Colonial Marines is what they're called, from Aliens. The second Alien movie, the sequel to Alien. So, those are the examples of Marines. They are both in space and on planets. They do a lot. Merchants. Rather than give you examples of merchants, I'm giving you examples of the kinds of vessels the different merchants would use. Merchant Marine, we've got a double turret with potentially another pop-up turret right here. 2 more turrets or like sensor jammers. These guys are serious. These are probably going to be a part of a much larger convoy of trading vessels. Probably a few free traders in there, but these guys are soldiers of fortune. They're hired Marines to protect the tradeways, and they're going to be alongside these free trading ships. This is a free trader. It's literally what the name of the ship is called. It has a single turret. Not really the best fighting ship, but it's got a huge hull because you can fill it up with so much cargo and just different things to run. The broker is going to be on a stationary vessel. This is Deep Space Nine from the popular Star Trek series Deep Space Nine. It's not going anywhere. It stays in orbit around the planet that it orbits. But the convoy that this merchant marine is a part of is going to have free traders who are going to be docking with this starport, meeting with a broker here, and then selling their goods on the starport, which then a third party will then be distributing those goods to buyers planet side. That's how trade works in the galaxy, and that is how these different assignments of merchants help each other to keep trade going in this Traveler universe. For the Navy, we've got the line and crew like the red shirts in Star Trek, getting sent out to do God knows what. The engineer / gunners working below deck with Scotty here, it's also Star Trek. And then the flight crew, they're getting sent out to do battle in space, and there's going to be a lot of them, and it's Star Wars is a much better example of that. For nobility, we've got planetary administrators like the Baron Harkonnen from Dune. You've got the diplomats like Mon Mothma from Star Wars. And then you got the dilettantes like Cusco from The Emperor's New Groove. He's probably my favorite example of a dilettante in all of fiction. Yeah, I know it's not a sci-fi, but, I mean, he turns into a llama. That's kind of a sci-fi. Whatever, I don't care. Rogues, moving on, we've got Molly Millions from the William Gibson novels. She's one of my favorite females in all of sci-fi fiction in general, but she's a thief through and through, a real cat burglar sneaking in. For Enforcers, I've already forgotten this guy's name because it's been so long since I've watched The Expanse, but this guy from The Expanse, who should be everyone's favorite character from The Expanse, he's unquestionably the best character. And then, I'm sorry for throwing so many of my sci-fi opinions into there. For Pirates, I could have put the film Space Pirates up here, but honestly, that movie sucks so bad, I went ahead and put Cutthroat Island. If you haven't seen Cutthroat Island and you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean films and you enjoy those, I recommend you wind back time and go back to the early 90s and watch Cutthroat Island. Huge box office bomb, but if you like watching pirate movies with lots of fun explosions and good action, I recommend Cutthroat Island. Moving on. Scholars. For field researchers, we've got the cast of Annihilation. Great film, even better book. Scientists, astronauts in space for working for NASA are probably one of the best examples of sci-fi scientists that I can think of. Other than physicians, and we've got Frankenstein. We get the mad scientists, or just doctors in sci-fi in general. There's plenty of examples. I could have thrown Bones in there from Star Trek, but I didn't. And in retrospect, maybe I should have, but I wanted to throw a shout out to the first sci-fi scientist, physician, Dr. Frankenstein from Frankenstein. Finally, we have the Imperial Interstellar Scouting Service. This is specific to the Imperium. Couriers are going to be running mail inside the Imperium. Email all is digital, but it is placed on massive storage drums and sent from planet to planet. Surveyors are going to unexplored worlds and assigning them a universal planetary profile code. And then, explorers are going to worlds and giving them universal planetary profile codes. Surveyors are going to worlds that already have planetary profile codes and just confirming and making sure everything's accurate. Truthers, this is another weird career path that's in the Traveler's Companion book that I'll throw in there if you want to do it. There are also more. There are secret career paths that you can only get through certain means in the either through the campaign or in character creation. Basically, the character creation campaign, you can end up as a prisoner, you can end up as a psionic, and maybe some more secret ones down the way. But I think that's... Oh, no. Try not to die. Look for this career summary table. This is not currently accurate for the edition that we're playing, but you're going to have a qualification score based on a stat. You're going to have a survival score in that career path assignment based on a stat that you have, as well as an advancement roll based on the assignment as well. Do your research before you build your character. Figure out what you want to do before you build your character, and then do your best to try to accomplish those goals. But be aware you might not. You know, you might have a scientist who never graduated college, struggled to become a scientist, only had a single 4-year term that they didn't even finish as a field researcher, and then had to become a drifter. That's a great character to become a pirate. I'm sorry, like, that's a much more interesting character than a min-maxed, like, you gamed the system and got everything you wanted. That being said, I'm going to give you a mulligan. So I'm going to give you 2 free re-rolls and 1 free automatic success when you make your character, just to boost you a little more when you make your characters. Future characters in the campaign, I won't be giving you this. And you might have to generate them a little bit differently. But we'll cross those bridges when we come to it. I want everybody to have one character that's kind of OP. That's going to be a lot of fun for them to play. Finally, 10 questions to ask your character to flesh them out. I'm just going to go over these real quick. This is the final section. How do you feel about the Third Imperium's presence within the Trojan Reach? How do you feel about the Aslani Hirates presence in the Trojan Reach? What is your family like, and how is your relationship with them? Most folks never leave their home world. What made you want to become a traveler? What is your happiest memory? What is your worst memory? You have a food and drink replicator that can make anything in the galaxy. What is your favorite meal? There's a lot of downtime on a spaceship. Does your traveler have any hobbies? What are your character's greater goals in life? And does your character have any vices or weaknesses, or are they boring? I want to explain that last one real quick. Captain Kirk versus Picard. Captain Kirk is not a very good spaceship captain, and I would not want to be a member of his crew in general. He's very emotional, and he gets very involved in the emotional side of being a captain in a lot of ways. And there's some episodes that are great examples of him just being an awful captain. Picard is a much better example of a captain. I would rather be on a ship with Picard as my captain. Now, that being said, if I'm watching a TV show or reading a book or a story, I want to read about Kirk every time, because I know it's going to be a lot more interesting. That's what I mean by boring. Being good at your job doesn't always mean you're going to be an interesting character to read about. It's more fun to read about, for me, it's more engaging for me to read about detectives and stories who aren't Sherlock Holmes, who miss information, who miss clues or misinterpret them, and I have the opportunity as the reader to do more with that and to kind of like figure out the inner workings or the machinations of the mystery itself. And then I think that applies for role-playing games for me as well. I like characters who are going to role-play them making the wrong choice in situations because it's what their character would do, and I'm going to reward that behavior at the table mechanically with inspiration tokens and other kind of bonuses. That being said, it's now been over 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining me on this Traveler and Pirates of Drinax deep dive exposition dossier. Thank you so much. I really greatly appreciate you sticking to the end of the video. I hope you appreciated it. If you're in the campaign, we'll be talking again very soon. If you're not in the campaign yet, I'm sorry, but I plan to post campaign diaries here on my channel to show that I'm still around. I still run role-playing games. It's just been a while. And again, if you've been supporting me all this time, thank you so much. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the comments and the kind words. I really cannot express how much it means to me to be back here doing this sort of stuff again. I love you all so much, and I hope that you have a kick-ass summer and a great evening and a great time at your own tables, and take this inspiration with you. Thank you again. Have a lovely evening. Have a lovely day.